guys, we're here today going over the new Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet news. We had some news drop at Worlds, and I want to discuss the competitive implications this would have. So if you guys do enjoy this type of content and you want to see more, leave a like below and subscribe. And with that said, let's get started. So this trailer was about 2 minutes, but we got a ton of different information regarding the competitive scene, battling formats for Scarlet and Violet, Tracele, and many other things. But first, let's start off with the big one. Battles are returning to their normal format from just Sword and Shield in general. This means we'll obviously have the Battle Stadium. I'm assuming this was pretty implied. I can't imagine that they would have had this become the next VGC meta game and not have ranked battles, because it seems like it's become an integral part, even just of the tournament scene at this point. So I'm very excited about this one. There's nothing really too new about this, just really the only new thing that we have is that it seems like the trainer cards are updated and they're more like an actual badge, I guess, at this point. But otherwise, though, besides the trainer cards flipping vertically, or not vertically, horizontally, nothing really new has come out of this as far as we are aware yet. But I did just want to touch on the fact that ranked battles have returned. Figured it was an important thing, especially for anyone who might have been unsure after Legends Arceus and BDSP. But next about Tracele, we did get a couple things confirmed about this. For one, it is confirmed that it does switch the Pokemon that are potentially dual type to just a pure type. We did get the confirmation. For example, Tyranitar becomes pure Ghost here, and Colossal in this case ends up becoming a pure water type, which you can see specifically because of the fact that in this screenshot right here, it says in the middle one, it is not very effective for Steam Engine. So because of stuff like that, obviously we are aware that this does take out both types, because otherwise if Colossal was, let's say, Water Rock or Water Fire, it would have been a neutral hit. So we do also have confirmation though with the new Terra Blast move that this is actually a confirmed TM for terrestrial Pokemon, which is actually really huge. It will automatically change based on the Pokemon's terrestrial type when it is terrestrialized. So you can't just throw this move on all 6 of your Pokemon and take advantage of it, which I do think actually is a pretty cool addition, considering the fact that otherwise it's pretty much just hidden power, but it also then benefits from the fact that you can change your type and make it stab randomly. So I do like the fact that this would end up just being a normal move when not terrestrialized. I think it's a little bit of a nice balance personally. And not only this, but we did get the confirmation that it does adapt based on physical or special, whichever one is the higher stat for the user. So I'm actually really happy about this one. It does mean that we don't need to run just 2 different moves and potentially have 2 moves that you can hit and adapt. Because let's say on a Greninja, for example, if there was a physical and a special terrestrial move, and you were able to use both at the same time, that'd be pretty broken because you could adapt it for whatever you wanted. Even if it is the same move, it's still the implication of it for a Pokemon that might be trying to hit a type that it typically doesn't have coverage for could be pretty good. But I think that having another one specific move is personally the best bet. But just wanted to give the minor updates to those because obviously the ranked battles are pretty cool for anyone who does enjoy them. I personally do as well, so I was really glad to see them back. And obviously having Terrestrial move, again, really does make the benefit of terrestrializing in general a lot more exciting, because now you're not going to be limited based on what types a Pokemon has for its move pool. But let's get to our first new thing, being the new Pokemon Cyclizar. So for anyone who has eyes, this does look like it is potentially the pre-evolution to Miraidon. It's another dragon type and it has the wheel, and I think especially the fact that this is a dragon normal type Pokemon, this ends up really giving the implication that it's going to split evolve into one of the other Pokemon, similar to how Cosmog and Cosmoem did. They were pure Psychics, and they evolved into Psychic Steel and Psychic Ghost, depending on which game you ran. So personally, that's what I'm kind of thinking is going to happen with this. It does have the ability Shed Skin, which makes the next option, which will be the new items that I'm going to go into, a little bit weirder, but I'll get into that in a bit. Just more so specifically why this was the demo Pokemon for them. But it seems like this Pokemon, even in here, is meant to show that it's a motorcycle, so you know, very, very, very blatantly foreshadowing this is probably just going to be the cover legend pre-evolution. But next up though, we do have a new signature move this has, which is Shed Tail. So Shed Tail, basically, it's a new momentum gaining move that ends up creating a substitute, and it'll pass the substitute into whatever Pokemon you're trying to switch into. Now, it seems like this is a signature move, which is honestly, even if it is a signature move, this is incredible in my personal opinion. I'm kind of hoping this is the pre-evolution to the cover legends, because I would personally hate to see this in a majority of different metagames for VGC at the very least. I feel like this would be something that could be really opening the door to a lot of setup sweepers and an extremely aggressive metagame, though to be fair at the same time, I think the bigger implication is it would in a lot of cases, depending on what Pokemon you pass it into, create a lot of situations where you would need to dual target that Pokemon just to make sure it doesn't try and set up and destroy your team, which has its benefits, but I think at the same time it could potentially be broken, but we'll have to see. One of the things that does keep me hopeful is the fact that despite the fact that one of my friends actually pointed out, Burgo, he said that the sub does take up 50% of Cyclizar's health, but my personal guess is it's because of the fact you're also getting the switch and the free momentum, and it will probably just be a 25% sub, I'm going to hope. If it is a 50% sub, that's honestly really insane if this Pokemon does have some good base HP. Though, one thing I will mention there is it does seem like someone pointed out this Pokemon has a very low base HP stat, thankfully, in the trailer. I think someone was saying that this should be around the 40s, if I remember correctly. The math breaks down to the 40s. But I do need to double check my notes on that one, actually, because it seemed like there were... I mean, even still, in general, the trailers aren't necessarily the most indicative, but it does seem like the about 47 base HP if it's max HP, or up to 70 if it's completely uninvested. So it's not the most HP, thankfully. This isn't like some base 100 Pokemon passing a 50% sub, but even still, it could be potentially damning. It just really depends on what Pokemon get it, if this is just limited to the Cyclizar or not, and also, I guess, really how... I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a very interesting move, but we're going to have to see how this plays out. I think this could potentially be really broken, but I'm kind of unsure now because we do still not have a... We still do lack a ton of the details, basically, on how much HP this sub will have and how much it could potentially have. But, yeah, I think it does open up the door a lot, and especially if this... Typically, Pokemon's been introducing a lot of signature moves in later games to other Pokemon, especially for non-legendaries at the very least. So stuff like, for example, Water Shuriken was a signature move in Gen 6 for Greninja, and in Gen 7 it also is now accessible by Selgor. So I'm personally a little bit nervous if this isn't a legendary Pokemon, how distributed this move might get, but we'll just honestly have to see. Next up though, as I did mention, we have the new items, and I'm gonna actually switch over here and there between this window and the images that I've actually saved, just because that way then we can see them a bit easier without scrolling down enough. But first up we do the Mirror Herb, which basically, when a Pokemon does use a setup move, like for example in this case right here, we do actually see Azumarill going for a Belly Drum. So with Belly Drum Azu here, of course, we see that it's going to cut its own attack at first, and then Satitan, which is holding the Mirror Herb, is going to copy the opponent's stat changes. So right off the bat, I do actually think this is an incredible item to try and counter setup sweepers, specifically Pokemon that are going for Quiver Dance or Geomancy sweeps. Geomancy, I'm exclusively talking about Xerneas here, unless you are really trying to pop a Geomancy Smeargle, which could be a thing for Baton Pass, I guess. But this is honestly a really good anti-Baton Pass cheese, because if you were to pop the Mirror Herb at the end of a Baton Pass chain, of course you do need to predict this right, but if you were to pop it after a couple boosts and then steal of all the boosts, well, I'm not sure actually, does this copy all the opponent's stat changes, or does this just copy the Pokemon stat changes from the specific turn? I do think that's something that we'll need to figure out in general, but it could potentially actually be really amazing if it copies all of them. However, if it's just the active form, that's still honestly really fine, because in this case, for example, even if, let's say, Azu had a Spidef boost as well, or even let's say someone passes Geomancy into this, and then Azu set up a Belly Drum after that, it's still going to be very weak in its physical defense, and at worst, even if this is going for, let's say, curses, you could still at the very least get the +1/+1, and then you're still hitting for equally your boosted attack to your opponent's boosted defense. So I don't think it'll be a huge deal, but it's definitely something interesting at least. Next up though, we do have the Covert Cloak. So the Covert Cloak basically makes sure that you are immune to secondary effects. As we can see in this example for with Cyclizar, the Hariyama is going for a Fake Out here, and then on the next turn, the Cyclizar is going for Dragon Claw immediately. So this is where I mentioned that using Cyclizar as the example is a little bit weird, but my guess is it's just because it happened to be the new Pokemon, though with Shedskin, it does feel kind of funny, and I know that Shedskin isn't for all secondary effects to be fair, but it does feel kind of funny that they're using a Pokemon that can inherently remove secondary effects anyway, or at the very least statuses, to showcase a item that does clear the ability to actually use secondary effects on this Pokemon at all. So I do think it's a little bit interesting personally, but regardless though, I think this item will be something that could potentially be used on Pokemon, specifically in VGC. I feel like is where it would most mostly see usage, though there might be a case in singles to see Scald Burn, I guess, mostly to avoid Scald Burns, I should say, on physical sweepers, but typically what I think will be the case is this will be used on Pokemon that are trying to avoid Fake Out, as shown in this example, that might be trying to get an early, I guess just an early lead on kills for their side. For example, if let's say the opponent is using a Fake Out Raichu, which I know it's a really weak Fake Out example, but it's easier to illustrate a point this way, and Raichu has a Focus Sash. So typically, if Raichu was to Fake Out, let's say I have a Regieleki and a Cyclizar in the field. If Raichu was to Fake Out the Cyclizar, because Regieleki would most likely not touch it with Lightning Rod, I could typically go for the Regieleki attack and Raichu would draw it in, and then I would have nothing done this turn. However, in this case, even if I was to attack Regieleki and use an electric move, I could still have Cyclizar attack with Dragon Claw in this case, and Raichu's at least brought down to its Sash, to where next turn I could pop it off with E-Speed on Regieleki, or B, the alternative is now if I was to E-Speed Raichu instead with Regieleki, and it gets brought down to its Sash, Cyclizar can now just take it out completely, and the Lightning Rod user is now completely away from the field. So there's obviously a lot of other situations where this might be the case. It's far from just Raichu, but I figured Raichu was an example that was frail enough to where it would probably run a Focus Sash set, where Fake Out would still actually be a prevalent move to use on its moveset. So I do think this could be kind of cool in some niche situations, specifically around Brawler Fake Out Mons, but I am still kind of curious on how much this will end up getting used. It's going to be one of those moves I think will be like a secondary or tertiary item, but in VGC where there is a lot of item clause, I don't think it's going to be as useless as something like Heavy Duty Boots, which literally just is used for hazards and singles and it's pretty much it. But we'll have to see. Finally though, we do have the new item, the Loaded Dice, which one thing I will say is my friend Burgo, who was pointing out all of the mechanic stuff in between the trailers to me, had ended up pointing out the Breloom in the game, and I know he's a huge Breloom fan, so glad to hear for him. But basically this makes multi-hit moves such as Bullet Seed, for example, more likely to hit on the higher end of their usages. This seems, if I had to guess, this is probably a consumable item. I can't imagine it wouldn't be, but it would be interesting to see it be an actual just full-blown held item. I think that can make it actually really amazing, but otherwise, at the very least, it's still not a terrible one, depending on how you position it. One thing I will say, though, is Burgo actually also pointed this out to me, and I'm actually really nervous if this is the case, but in terms of multi-strike moves, specifically stuff like Triple Kick and for Triple Axle, it could be very interesting to see if this does mean that those moves will also end up getting increased to the 3-turn side. I do think, to be fair, they will be different because it seems like it's more so an accuracy thing that each individual hit has the option to miss instead of just going for 2 to 5 turns or even 1 to 3 turns in this case. It seems like they're each accuracy based to their own end, where stuff like Bullet Z, for example, it's a 100% accurate move. So I do think that, to be fair, it will be treated differently, but it would be very interesting to see if it does affect those types of mons, because honestly something like Weavile could end up being pretty broken with that if it's just getting a consistent 3-turn Triple Axle every single time, because especially if this wasn't a consumable item, getting every single time you use Triple Axle the maximum amount of hits would honestly be pretty insane, considering Weavile already hits ridiculously hard. And I think, truthfully, Weavile would even trade a Choice Band or Heavy Duty Boots just to make sure it's consistently getting that 3-turn strike, because that would basically be the equivalent of getting 180 base power Ice-type move on anything you go for. And thanks to the item, the only drawback would be that you're not actually using another item, which Weavile already uses Heavy Duty Boots anyway. So if you were to just bring in Weavile a single time, this wouldn't really matter because you wouldn't need to consistently bring in Weavile on hazards. So that's just one example this could be really broken with. Stuff like Ambipom and Chinchino could be pretty good in low tiers. Specifically Chinchino, especially if it's going for Technician sets, because Technician, on top of this as well, not needing to worry about getting only a 2-turn hit in exchange for running Skill Link and getting the guaranteed 5, could honestly be pretty amazing in my personal opinion. But I would love to see, obviously, what you guys think of all these new buffs and changes we've had to the competitive scene. If you guys do enjoy this video, of course, leave a like below and subscribe. And with that said, I will see you guys in Wednesday's video. Until then, peace out, guys.